premonition of the Chinese team who is in no match for them.
Well, you know, here's an interesting fact for you. A nice little fact coming at you. Cubans are outnumbered 5-1. The only one is, I think they got Francis Merca Francis, I should say, in there, number 16. Haven't seen much of her, don't know much about her game. We'll get a chance to see it tonight.
So the Cubans will have to do without the regulators Bell and also without Torres, and it will be Lilia Espredo, the 30-year veteran, to take the serve here, who will have to do the state work for the Cubans today.
Well, they're going to have to fill the gap left by the two regulators. Of course, Regla Bell and Regla Torres, you know, the consummate spikers on this team and the ones that really, really keep this engine moving. But you're going to see that there's some, they're going to be, you know, switching this off a little bit. We still have Ana Fernandez in there, 1.85, number 14, who I really think is a big third spiker on this team, and she's going to be a factor as well.
10,000 spectators here today on day 2 of competition. Russians opening up a 3-0 lead here as Stracheva serves.
No surprise there either. Cubans, even against the Brazilians, got off slow. They really did. Next thing you know, the Cubans were up on them. The Brazilians were up on them 10-1, and they were just coasting. Cubans don't heat up real fast, so once they get their groove, they're as good as they come. But the Russians here, on the other hand, already in a 4-0 lead. I think we got a side out finally. But the Russians have been just showing a lot of offensive depth all the way around. Of course, they got the best blockers in the house there with Tichenko and Artemanova. You know, they're just a big, big team that's come on real fast here with Godina especially doing the spiking work.
The Cubans again looking for the opening point following that good work there from Umilka Ruiz. A spike that fouled the hands of Tichenko. The ball will stand out. Now the Cubans still looking for the opening point here in this first set. Cubans starting off like they did against the Brazilians. Very slow, not getting into rhythm yet. And another error, this time from Adel Miscato.
Well, as I was saying, I think for the Russians, this is a great window of opportunity for this young team. Godina only 19 years old. They got a chance to get themselves in a $250,000 purse here. And, you know, with the Cubans down with their two best players, what better shot do you have? And I'm sure Nikolai Karpov hasn't missed that, and he's impressed upon them very heavily. We got a timeout on the floor now.
Now, I have a...
enjoying the battle here on court. The Charangpong is the referee for today. 6-1 now, they lead.
And this is exactly what the Russians did to the Chinese. They got out early. They were running loose. And now we're seeing it happen here against the Cubans. But the Cubans a little different story. They don't have the height, but they have a lot of great individual athleticism out there. It's going to be a question of whether these fillers coming in there for the regulators are going to be able to take on that offensive chore. And I got a suspicion that they will. It's not going to be a cakewalk for the Russians by any means.
And I'm sure the Cubans, especially Ana Fernandez, will miss the company of Bell and Torres. But, of course, we saw Adel Miscato coming in for the match against the Brazilians, and she was mighty impressive, Steve.
You bet. In the kind of way she was impressive, even though they did lose, was the fact that she brought in another dimension to this offense. The quick attack, the quick little shots, none of this big superpower kind of stuff where you got a bunch of Wonder Women out there who can hit that ball lickety-split. They were doing other things out there, and it was largely her that was doing it. I imagine she'll do it again today because that's part of her motif there.
Well, the only Cuban player, but a question as to her temperament would be Francis Merca. There she is, number 16, only brought on to play in patches in many of the Cubans' games.
Well, one thing for sure, the Cubans can't afford to have any more after game 10-round main events out here. They're going to run out of players.
Well, what has happened after that defeat to the Brazilians? There was certainly some unsightly moments on court, and the Cubans have paid the price. Two of the Brazilians will miss the services of two of their best players as well.
Yeah, both of them got sent off the court there. Ana Flavia Sangard, number 13 from Brazil, for the fans who remember her. And, of course, Philo Bodziak, that big 1.92 player they had, she's sitting on the bench. In fact, she won't even be out there. They're not even allowed to sit out there. Anyway, that's then. This is now. But this is what we got here. I think the Russians, as I say, they've profited by all this hoopla out there, and I hope that they're a mature enough club that they can be able to pull it through. There's Morozova on the serve. Really played against the Chinese, didn't they say? We had a chance to see that one. They just went through it. They didn't care about the crowd. Didn't matter. They just went right through it, and it was Godina and I guess Artemanova that really did the damage on the spike power. Watch for him tonight, especially Artemanova's big serve. Boy, she's got a beautiful, beautiful jump serve.
Francis Merker putting the ball long and wide again. And if the Russians can chalk up victory number 2 today over the Cubans, then it will be the final showdown over the Brazilians to see who will capture the top prize of $250,000.
Speaking of the serve, there it is. You just saw what power it has. The Cubans can answer it. You see, Gatto came across there, hit a big spike. Here she comes. Look at her. Pretty shot. Great angle right between her legs. That's what the Cubans are going to have to do, and they can do it. That's not some kind of a fluke. That's part of their game mentality.
Another great serve. Twice in a row we've seen Lilia Izquierdo. A serve here for Adamis Gata going up there with both hands. And it's judged here by Li Chen, the second referee from China. That Gato perhaps has touched the net on the way over.
And I have suspicion. You watch number 1, Yumilka Ruiz. I think she's going to be a real chatterbox out there. She's going to take over a lot of this leadership, even though she's only 18 or 19 years old. She seems to have that never-ending enthusiasm for this game.
Ironically, it was Yumilka Ruiz who made way for Gato in yesterday's match against Brazilians.
Yeah, she did. She had nothing to do with all that nonsense yesterday or the day before that. And so now, you know, we're into a situation where she can now take her team back into it. And I think she's going to be a factor, if not anything else, for attitude.
Well, serve again coming in from the Cubans. That time is Gato. At least today we won't be able to watch Torres and her serves and misserves and feature today. Let's hope the rest of the Cuban girls.
Well, the Russian defense has to ping on the fact that they're going to be looking at a lot of Sanchez coming in. I'm sorry, Anna Fernandez coming in there at number 14. She is going to be clearly a factor, I would assume, along with Gatto. The question is whether they'll have enough balance to be threatening. Let's see.
Cubans still lagging behind in points here. Good number of them. Stracheva there was setting it up for Artemanova, but was charged down there from Francis Merker.
Well, Francis Merker did something that the Chinese couldn't do. They at least that time, shut down that far spike, side spike coming across there. Chinese just could not do that, and it's what really opened up the dam for them, put the holes in the dam, and got the win for the Russians. Godina now going to her serve. She, of course, is going to figure to be a factor as well because she loves to come at you from that secondary position. She loves that type of shot, as does Artemanova. They come right down the center. They're not much of an angled team.
4-7. It remains 3 points behind as Maleni scores the serve. And another great block there that will earn them a point. And again it came off Francis Merker. Suddenly thrust into the spotlight.
Doesn't seem to mind at all and already starting to show herself as a bona fide replacement for sure. Not much of a crowd here compared to what we saw with the Chinese earlier on. Here we've got maybe, you can see a sparse crowd up in the stands. I would doubt maybe, what, 3,000-4,000 out there?
But I'm sure the fans will come trickling in for the second match today when the Brazilians take on the Chinese.
Yeah, no doubt. They've been having good attendance here, filling the house, 11,000. I expect we'll see that by the time we get into the second game here.
I'm sure the crowd's also a little disappointed then with the very token resistance put up by the Chinese team against the Russians yesterday. 7-5 is still lead here over the Cubans.
Well, yeah, it has to put a dent in their thinking, really. I mean, because Chinese being the silver medal winner is figured to be a top contender for this one and going down to the Russians the way they did. But if you've been watching the Russians the way we have, that comes as no surprise. They are the team on the roll here.
And they are in the 3-point lead here. Damis Gato then, the ball coming off the hands of Morozova.
And there's Yumilka Ruiz figuring into this game already, taking over that serve. I love her attitude. She gets my commentator award for attitude because she sure showed it here.
Not to mention the most energetic player of this tournament, Yumilka Ruiz might be a dark horse running in contention for that title.
You're right, and there's $5,000 here. That's not chicken feed here. That's a lot of money, $5,000 US for for that player who selected. She certainly showed me something there. A couple Korean players I saw, a couple Japanese also right in there as well. Obayashi comes to mind, a couple of the others.
This ball is over against them for the Russians, and all the Cuban girls just moved aside there.
Well, that was just a serve that just really hugged that net. I don't know how it really cleared. It was a great serve. Another one not so bad, nice and deep.
Lilia Skirdo this time, the ball pushed out by Tichenko.
Well, what you see happen with these Cubans that's different than the other teams is when they do get set up for their spike, the pace of that ball is noticeably faster and more difficult to contend with than some of these other teams we've seen. There it is, a kick over the top. That's legal.
Well, we saw the Brazilian girl going to work there. The Russian also doing the same likewise with the foot.
And they'll also do something probably better than anybody else in the house will do. They'll angle the ball, and here you'll see it. Now watch this. Oh, we're not going to get a chance to see it. It was a great spike. I think it was that front line that didn't get the player, but doesn't matter. They all can pretty well do it. And that's what gives the Russians trouble. They've got to learn to contend with that. Gatto can do it. It's not coming at you as flat as we saw with the Chinese. Chinese ball a little bit flatter, and of course Sun Yi wasn't involved in any of that at all. We have not been able to get an answer to that up to now.
Well, we've seen Russian six who won that particular encounter over the Chinese here in the court today against the Cubans. Everybody Gracheva here with the serve. Izquierdo sets it up nicely here for Gatto, and again, the bounce of Gatto was good.
And you see the forever aggressive style of Nikolai Karpov. He's seeing something out there he doesn't like. I don't think the Russians are playing as pumped up as we saw them the other match against the Chinese. They're really not as strong. And there we're starting to see Godina coming into it, and you can hear Karpov in the background. He just simply is trying to tell him, get your act together.
Izquierdo again setting up nicely for Yunuka Ruiz, and this time comes on Adamanova.
I think the Cubans just naturally, as athletes, are about a step or so faster, or a half step faster than the Russians. They're smaller, but I just think their athleticism is a little bit more apparent, and that could deal some headaches to the Russians as this night progresses.
Only Ano Fernandez can stand in the company of the tall Russians then. It is standing at 1.85 meters.
You hear Ruiz getting the ball, but then you hear Karpov in the background really starting to get in their faces, his team's face. He's not happy at all.
Ruiz will be the unofficial leader of the Cuban team here in court. The score shows the Russians having a 2-point lead here.
Good serve. Had to dig it out, but Cubans characteristically did it.
Gracheva setting up nicely against Adamanova, and the Cubans were caught out there. All the girls in various positions are unable to return the ball then. And it is the Russians who now have a 3-point lead here over the Cubans. And we'll be back in a moment after the break. With the way the Cubans claw back from 5-1 down to 10-7.
Well, they're playing tough volleyball, and they're a naturally talented team. He can get excited if he wants, but then, of course, you got a real contrast over there with Perdomo on the other side. He reminds me of a librarian. He doesn't get too serious about, he doesn't get, at least on court, it doesn't look like he gets too angry about anything. He might not be too happy tonight knowing that he's got two of his players watching this one on TV, but Karpov is just that kind of guy. That's just his game, and I think these women really respect him, as does the volleyball world, for his ability. He's certainly done a job getting them here, didn't he?
They are in with a good chance of claiming the top prize should they beat depleted Cuban side here today. Second time round, the Russian girls sending the ball long. First the side out to the Cubans, and then that one counted, and they're now within a point.
Yeah, for all intent and purpose, we got a new volleyball game out here right now. Russians were able to get that early lead, but unlike what they did against the Chinese, they couldn't hold it. This is a talented club, the Cubans. They're not two-time gold medal winners for nothing.
Adelita Ruiz gets the equalizing point. There's the place of a 30-year-old veteran. He hasn't really lost the pace in many of the pool matches, and also came in correctly in yesterday's game against the Brazilians, but she's in today, and so is this Russian girl, Manchova, seeing action for the first time. It's five again from Artemanova.
Well, the key to the Russian offense, the key to the Russian strategy is to establish dominance. And if you can establish it as early as possible, so much the better. So far, they haven't done that. They've been sputtering on dominance, and it's very evident because these players, and this one right here, Ruiz, is coming back in them and showing no intimidation at all. Watch that. You see what I mean? This is the kind of thing, and they're not being able to pick it up, and I think they're doing a better job, the Cubans, on the dig as well. So if they can't get that dominance, they're going to start sputtering a bit, and that's what we're witnessing, and that's why the Cubans have pulled into the lead now.
They have got a point off that serve there from Ruiz. And not that time, the second time round then.
She'll make her mistakes, but she'll just come back with more enthusiasm next time. Not happy about her error. But now they've got to get it right. Now they've got to start getting this machine moving here.
And it's the Russians who are now chasing for the equalizing point, and that one is put out there from Lilia Izquierdo. And as soon as the ball left her hand, she knew that it wasn't good.
Lila is a good, solid veteran, as you already indicated, and she'll help this team a lot.
And that is Costa setting up for Ana Fernandez, and that slips off the hand of the Russian Tichenko.
Francis doing her number. Good player. Haven't seen much of her this tournament either. Just an indication of how deep this team really can run when it has to.
Now the Russians going there for the side out, but the Cubans have notched up the points thanks to Ruiz and Gato forming the block there, denying the Russian space. Michael Francis serving. This time it goes long.
I just think if the Cubans are going to beat them with this offensive lineup that they've got right now, because they don't have the big guns, they're going to have to show them some other things. They're going to have to do a lot of scraping, a lot of side movement, a lot of dinking, a lot of different things other than just doing the regulator number here.
Well, the Cubans this time failing there in the jump shot, trying to pull one over, a soft-swing shot. It didn't quite work out. So it's finally balanced again at 12 points all with a jump serve here from Artemanova. Easily countered there by Lilia Izquierdo. Now Tichenko. Izquierdo setting up here for the ponytail. The dummies Gato. With Gracheva from the back comes Artemanova.
Here again you hear Karpov. Of course, the polite Chinese audience sitting out there watching this demonstration here of his anger. And he's really heating it up now. He's gotten into Gracheva. He's been on her case the last two timeouts. And it's obviously, you know, the reason I think that's happening is because Gracheva is the key to this. If she doesn't set her machine up properly, nothing rolls. She's the premier setter on that side.
Nikolai Karpov just can't wait to give a piece of his mind then to the girls. Look at the player in the background there. Staring sullenly into the ground.
Sort of morose looking. Gracheva saying, oh man, this is not one of these kind of days for me. The boss is not happy with my game. But she really is a great setter. I love to watch her game. Right now they're just sort of stumbling along, but I got to tell you, it's partly because of the Cubans taking them a little bit out of their rhythm. They're very quick. And like I say, they're slipping in and sliding on them. They're doing a little rope-a-dope out there. It's paying off.
Cubans coming to work again to Ana Fernandez. And it will be substitution time. Zuela Barros coming in, and out goes Melendez Costa.
Well, it often plays, as I recall, a lot of this so-called libero. Today she's coming in as a starter. Good for her. Maybe she'll be able to show some offensive style we haven't seen, because that libero number is a little bit limiting for some of these players.
Zuela Barros still only 20, as we saw there, the first serve from Izquierdo.
They just look a little bit edgy to me, the Russians do. I don't know what it is. Maybe they got such a big window to climb through, they're hesitant to do it. There's a good shot. A lot of individual talent that time.
Well, the Russians couldn't kill off the Cubans first time round, and in the end, they do a number over the Russians.
More of Moyogato's shake and bake number there. Zigging and zagging, slipping and sliding. That's what I think you're going to see the Cubans do, and it's starting to show up now.
Elena Gorina coming in again for Menshova, as the Russians look now towards her to try and win this first set. They were leading very comfortably, 5-1, 10-7, and then come the Cubans.
They're trying to talk to each other, get themselves back in the movie here. because the thing's just sort of slipping away from him. It's like kind of like grabbing a bowl full of Jello. Can't seem to get a handle on what the problem is.
Cuban countering, exploiting it to the fullest. And again, there was a stroke of fortune then for Ana Fernandez. Ball coming off the hands of Armadova on the way over.
Anna likely the only righteous spiker they have out on this team right now. And there again, some of this quick action tactic. This time Frassen's doing it, and this is just dealing them grief. Locked up at 13 apiece again, Trey.
And here's another side out at this crucial moment as we see her again. Mercer Francis then a dig, which is not too good.
Well, she tried to dig it. She really needed to pass that ball and get something out of it. Instead, she got it over the net, and one of those opportunistic, don't know which one, I think it was Francis, come right up there with that quick attack.
And we just saw a picture of contrast that Perdomo, ever so patient with his girls.
Yeah, talking through him, talking his nice Spanish there. Rolling her out right on through. And I like to call this Cubans rolling thunder, I really do. Especially when I had the regulators out there. Boy, it was fun watching them do their thing. Especially when they started grooving it, yinging and yanging, going for it. I mean, it was really something to see. But now you're getting to see a Cuban team that shows you even more dimension in my mind. They're not being intimidated by this much, much taller Russian side.
And the Russians have got the side out again through that effort from Gondina. Certainly it would be sad not to see the regulators in action again here in the final leg of the 1996 WVGP.
Well, I'm sure the folks at ESPN are going to get plenty other opportunities to see it because they brought the best volleyball you can get right now in this tournament. We'll see them again for sure. They're around here for a while.
And then is Costa now coming in, and out goes Zela Baros. Crucial moments here in this first set. 2 more points for either team, and the set will be over. And it's now the Cubans' turn going to look for point number 14. Denied here by the number 8, Armadova.
And the Russian Bear showing some signs. Looks like she wants to wake up here, but still got a ways to go. I think this is a very pesky Cuban side out there that's just not going to give much room.
Here comes Emilka Ruiz, and 3 Russian players countering that spike from Ruiz, and it lands within the Cuban half, and the Russians are now at set point.
That Iron Curtain gets up there, they got a chance to do it.
The serve from Batutina. And it's Ruiz, and Ruiz pounds the ball wide to her dismay, and the Russians have notched up this opening set, 15-13.
Well, they've drawn first blood, they have, but boy, it's been a struggle. Gives you kind of an indication that this is not going to be a cakewalk. No free rides tonight.
Unfortunately then for the Russians, they awoke at the right moment, and they have won this opening set 15-13. Set number 2 is next on ESPN. Standings here, 8 standings were seen. These players having to go through 4 weeks of schooling volleyball before the 4 best teams come to Shanghai here. The Russians won the first 15-13. Here's set 2.
And what you just saw there is Gracheva in her best. You know, she just set that ball up nicely. That's the classic rhythm form for the Russians, and Armadova now on her famous jump serve. And if they can keep that type of pace up, they're going to have a lot of problems, the Cubans here. They played them pesky, but it's going to take more than that to beat them.
The ball coming off. The block there from Mr. Francis and Ana Fernandez. Side out, back to the Cubans. Izquierdo. Cubans rather unfortunately then, despite a Gran fight back in the opening set, unable to win it in the end, just lost out at a limited margin, 13-15.
And the Russians now are starting to move along that net with a little bit more ease. They just look like they're a little, like they were watching the game there for the first part. They're actually kind of lucky to get through it. They did get it. Now I think they're starting to show a little bit more of that offensive flow that we saw against the Chinese. They were so successful at. It's a great team. They've really come up very, very strong in the last 4 or 5 games to put them into the final. Of course, they got there on stats, just beating out the Americans to get into this Final Four.
Cubans, on the other hand, played so well in the pool matches, winning 3 of the pools and finishing runner-up in 1.
Yeah, already pocketed $150,000, $50,000 per. Now we got, what, $240 here, or $250 left to take on. And, you know, that's got to be a big motivator. It would be for me.
Without the 2 regulars, it will be harder for the Cubans now.
Definitely so. But you can see what's happening here. It's not taking them out of their game, at least tonight. They're holding their own.
Ana Fernandez just showing us there. She means business today. Coming now for the serve. Shaver back steps in now. And now she comes. Godina.
Godina's getting into it. And boy, I tell you, Karpov is really on a roll tonight. And this Chinese audience here, the polite Chinese, are probably mesmerized by this man's behavior on the side of the court there. I don't know whether they want to watch the game or watch him.
That's a show on the sideline for the spectators. But the action here on court will be great. We've seen one set, and they went 15-13 to the Russians. And a fault called in on the Cuban. Point for the Russians.
Cubans moving the ball around a lot. Very, very happy feet. They got, you know what I mean by happy feet? They just bouncing all the time. You don't see any flat-footed players out there. Very rarely. That time, unfortunately, you did. But generally, you get that unit moving. They're just bouncing out there. The only other team I could see that had feet that moved quite like that, Japanese move that way as well. Very happy feet.
Well, the player who epitomizes that, of course, would be the number one, Yumilka Ruiz. There she is. And that spike of hers will stand out. There will be a side out here for the Cubans who come chasing back here with the 1 point to 2.
And he cost is standing 1.77 meters. Currently working off that service line. Her partner, Yumilka, she's 1.76. Izquierdo is 1.74. That tells you a story right there. Half that lineup are not all that big.
And Costa very nearly found the line there. Russians a bit fortunate then. Now they have a side out, and it will be Batutina to take it.
Also a jump server and very effective.
Together with Artemanova forming the jump server partnership for the Russians. Luka Ruiz there sends the ball down again.
Right, she sent a missile, she did. She sent him a message at 1.76 that if she gets the right timing and gets that ball in the right place, she can be lethal.
Ruiz may look small, but big on court in every sense of the word. Batutina, the free ball. Costa sets it up here for Adami's Gato, and negated there by Gracheva.
Good blocking on the part of the Russians. They need to do a lot of that consistently, even though they may not be looking at a downpour of spikes like you would normally expect to see. They still have to have that part of their game intact to win, as everything begins off that blocking with them.
The serve that time again from the Russian side out, back here to Batismerka. Simonova, Russian libero, sit well, send the ball over. There comes the part of Gato. Artemanova, back to the side here, and the ball very nearly fell in, but in the end pushed out by the block again.
I think that was Godina trying for it. She's getting shut down here a little bit, and it's interesting to see because the much smaller Cubans, just with their athletic ability, are anticipating very, very well. There's something you can anticipate. How do you deal with a serve like that? How many times we've seen Artemanova execute that way? That's well within her game discipline. She plays it well. Got a whistle on the play. Let's see if she can double it up.
3-2, Russians leading here. Second jump serve, ably counted in. And this time, the ball was counted in beyond the reach of Simonova from Ana Fernandez.
One of the characteristics of the Cuban side has been that any one of them can play a lot of one-on-one with you. And like one-on-one basketball, individually they're very, very talented, and given a chance, they can become very creative and opportunistic all by themselves.
So the set up here for Gato. Two Cuban players getting up on the block there, and Izquierdo couldn't meet that one from Artemanova.
No, I think, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I get 6 and 8 mixed up there because they look very similar. Artemanova showing a very similar spike than Godina has, and that time coming right off that secondary position.
There's Izquierdo trying to make amends with a good set up there for Gato. Again, the Russians countering that, and this time the ball was sent down from Marlenis Costa.
Costa went for a really quick attack, angled shot and almost got away with it. But it's that kind of shake and bake stuff that you're going to see the Cubans do. If they start getting hot, it's going to really negate the height and the movement, I would say, of the Russians.
Double angle, that last spike there from Costa didn't really look in, but the second referee called it good. Why the Cubans have that side out. Jimika Ruiz again. But Shaver sends it. A nice touch from Manova. This is Izquierdo. Izquierdo is coming into this match more and more then. And at time, there was a mistake there.
That's a good observation. I agree with that. As she gets more playing time, you're going to start seeing her rhythm come up a little bit. And if that's the case, then what you'll see is maybe more of an offensive variety out of the Cubans as we've seen so far. Good dig. That's what they do well.
Tag 2 was good. Russians could only provide token resistance then. Cubans dropped up another point. Now lead 4-3.
It's going to put money on the baseline crew out there, the last three or the bottom three on the secondary position. More often than not, I think it's the Cubans who'll come out on top. Again, because a little bit more better movement and athletic capability.
Another great serve, and they now lead 5-3. They'll take another short break next.
Well, he wants this team to get into that rhythm where they can establish dominance, and it just hasn't happened. The Cubans aren't allowing it. Then they're coming off this with Godina doing it. That's the kind of shots and that's the type of setup that they really need to be able to come just overwhelming. And they can do that even against this weaker side, the Cuban side. The Cubans are just pesky.
Cubans really have nothing to lose here. They are playing with the so-called scratch side.
Well, they're playing very well. And, of course, let's be fair about it. They do run very, very deep. We're just looking at superpower versus power. You know, with the regulators at superpower, now you're just down to a normal, powerful team.
Perhaps not as much exposure as the rest of the lesser players in the Cuban teams would have liked, but they certainly can hold their own. Look at Francis, Delmis Gato, they've seen how capable they have been in the pool matches so far. Nice set again for Artemanova. Here's the set again, second time round coming for her. Great block, great dig. That might put Gato in a little bit of trouble. Did well to send it back over. Here comes the ball again for Artemanova. And an extension of the arm there from Gato wasn't good enough.
And you can see just how hard the Russians are having to work to get every point. It's not a giveaway. It wasn't like just going through it like they did against the Chinese, who were seemingly unable to stop any of this. But the Russians are doing, the Cubans are doing a little bit differently. And they, like I say, they got a lot of peskiness in them. They're very, very determined type of team.
Now they're level again at 5-all. From Gordina. Great block again. There's Statopina, Morozova coming in to land a hand. Russians go in front. Just wonder if the constant shouting of Capo actually help his team or confuse them.
No, I don't think so. I think they're right comfortable with that. That's just part of living. It's like lifesavers. You know, you just really learn to endure that type of thing because that's just his temperament and nature. It would be really difficult. You have to go talk to a sports psychologist, I suppose. He might have another opinion, but I don't think so. I think they know him.
Well, if the going is good for the Russians, well, you can live comfortably through with a kind of arrestment, so-called, from Capo. I just wonder if the going is a bit more not in their favor, how the girls react. But it's something worth finding out for. Again, the Cubans setting a strike. It was well inside the Russian half. Side out. Ruiz will take it. Cheva steps up for Godina again. Now the set wasn't good enough. It crossed over into the path of Artemanova, who promptly sent it back.
Well, I tell you what happened there. That prior to that mistake on the Cuban side, what the Russians did was very, very effective. Had a good set, you had a good spike, but then you could see the Cubans' ability to dig on that secondary line, which I referred to earlier. That is something that they just do better, I think, than anybody once they're grooving, and that's something that Russians have to overcome. It's going to take 2 or 3 more shots to be able to get where they want to go, I think, in most points or side out.
Wall ran up again to deny the Cuban space. Notched up the 7th point in a row. Gato finally put a stop to that. Cubans to the side out.
And Karpov not happy with the blocking on the Russians. And he's got every right to be. They're getting a lot of shots through, and they need to shore that up, maybe get another player on that defensive lineman.
Still 2 points clear of the Cubans.
Another good dig. You see, this is the athleticism coming out again.
Fortunate for the Russian at time, Tichenko. Ball just flying off the hand of Gato. Side out back to Russians. Stayed in. They serve their time from Artemonova.
For whatever reason, the Russians are playing sluggish. They're not chatting it up like you saw them against the Chinese and some of the other clubs we've seen them play. They just are still not in their rhythm. They're there, but they're sputtering. Here again, another error. We may get a free ball out of this at the end of it. We do.
See whether the Cubans can put an end to this rally. And eventually it's the Russians who stole the point.
See, on that series there, you heard Karpov yell right at a critical time. Didn't flinch him at all. They just went right through and finished out the point. So I think it's like earplugs out there right now. They're just trying to find their rhythm and get into it, and he's doing what he can to help them.
Setting up there again for Gordina. Knocked in from Fernandez. Good push. 200 one of that. Cubans coming in and not quite finding the spots.
They're playing nervous. They're playing a little uptight right now. And I don't think it's got anything to do with the coach. I think it's just where they are. I don't know. I'm sure every one of these players is well aware of the fact that getting through this one is going to put them in a catbird seat, and they're going to be into some long green if they continue to win.
Well, everything that the Cubans are trying out just not working. And Tichenko has scored 2 points for the Russians now as they extend the lead to 4.
Ratcheva doing her job over there on that serve, isn't she?
And the ball is coming of the net then. There will be a side out here for the Cubans.
Cubans in danger now, falling some points behind. They need to get to work now, get themselves back in this contest a little bit closer. Can't get out of range with them.
And all too soon, the power of Artemonova once again coming to the forefront. Ball just spinning off hands of Fernandez. Setting up here nicely for Artemonova, who comes in from behind the attack line to send the ball over. And it is 10-5 here for the Russians. The outcome to this set in a moment.
You know, their expressions are they're sort of like a dubious kind of look on their face, you know, like they're in doubt, you know, all the time. Did you pick that up?
Well, if the Russians can counter the Chinese so effectively then on the opening set and playing before some 11,000 fans, then my bet is that the Russians have nothing to fear against the Cubans, faced worse by the absence of Torres and Bell.
I don't know. It's kind of a quandary right there. They're just sort of not there, yet they're still winning, and we're still hearing Karpov nail them hard. And there you can see one of the players, number 4, Bakutina, look over sort of nervously and furtively. I'm not sure exactly what's happening out there in the chemistry right now.
I do agree that the Russians are really here on court just going through the motions in robot-like fashion, not really enjoying the game.
Yeah, maybe that's it. It's real robot-looking, kind of mechanical right now. Not that kind of loose kind of game that we saw against the Chinese when they were loose and playing probably at their best.
Well, they went for the point there, and Morozova and Gracheva both looking for a position from the referee. Finally went Russians' way though. Bakutina comes here with the serve. And the Cubans powering down there. Milk Francis.
Well, you know, the fact of the matter is the jinx is on when you get into the Cubans, because these teams go up against these players and they're so talented. And then, you know, the fact that they are two-time gold medal winners, won virtually everything except, ironically, this tournament. You know, you get you to thinking, and it's a young team, the Russians. They're not that experienced.
Years to come, the likes of Artemanova and Gordina, when they do have more exposure, and the Russians, I'm sure, will be the team to watch out for.
Well, I think they're in the hunt for sure. They're trying to shift the balance of power of volleyball, world volleyball, and showing themselves off well tonight. Here it is, 10-7 now again, Kay. You see they're sneaking back into it little by little, and the Russians just sort of stumbling along there, just playing like you call so correctly the mechanical game here.
Now the Cubans, again, enjoying their moments, and Sergio Francis was the player there who pounded the ball down.
Kind of looks like they're trying to do the ballet on stilts out there. They're just sort of moving around real stiffly, you know. Now we see the exact opposite in contrast with Coach Perdomo with his traditional red shirt. We now get a shift back to Nikolai. He's slowed down a little bit on pace. And I wish I could speak my Russian better. I could tell you what he was saying, but let's see if the nonverbals can give us a message. He's just telling him, get in the game. Don't back off.
Russians still in the lead here as Artemanova and company comes back here for the resumption of this contest.
I think he's really telling them he wants to see a little bit more aggression on their team, not to get away from this real sort of back-off kind of offense, and there it is. You see Artemanova showing it to him.
Timonova, Russian libero, coming now. Cubans.
Oh, miscommunication. Bad one. Either a poor set or he didn't know it was coming that way. Doesn't matter. Russians pick up a point off of it. And this with this secondary team we're looking at, the power team out there, not the superpower, you're going to maybe see some of that because they don't know each other all that well in this configuration. They're used to coming in on different circumstances.
And that explains why there was a miscommunication there in the last point. Russians now 12-8.
Russians need to take full advantage of all those kinds of things. There again, another miscommunication and yet another error. They're not talking to each other. Suddenly the Cubans have decided to go into disconnect over there.
And Lilia Esquero, of all people, just one later to lead this Cuban team, and she pounded the ball wide then. 5 points behind now.
And Coach Perdomo very, very wisely get his teams back off there. You had 2 errors. It's either they're trying to do something they haven't done for a while, or they're just not hearing each other. Karpov, on the other hand, saying, hey, look, you're up 13 now. Shut the door on these people because you don't want to give them in the game. Cubans are the type of team that once they get on a roll on you, you got a Mack truck coming at you in 15th gear. I mean, you better get out of the way, otherwise you're going to have a lot of pain. They are pain merchants deluxe when they're moving.
Against the Brazilians, it was the same story. The Cubans falling behind 2 sets and coming back then, but eventually still lost.
Yeah, and in that 5th and deciding game, it was mostly, I have to admit, the Cuban unforced errors that did it, that put them so far behind they couldn't recover.
Well,
there's one more.
Well, that's not put them down as yet, even though the Russians are now at set point.
Well, this is the place the Russians dearly wanted to be. They didn't necessarily earn it. 2 or 3 points were gifts here at a critical juncture.
And the Cubans, at least now through Francis Merker, temporarily putting a stop them to the Russians' progress. Timonova sets up nicely, a good touch then. Cubans will lead to get the ball over. The set for Artemanova, that clips off the hands of the Cubans again.
Now we got a side out, I believe, and we're going to go back to try to get the clincher, that 15th point. If it's so, the Cubans have dug themselves quite a hole here to get out of. It may be a problem. Here comes the big jump serve.
And it doesn't bother the Cubans one a little bit, and coming back with one of their own to Ana Fernandez.
Now that's the first time we've seen Ana really heated up. She has not really been much of this offensive lineup, but she really is the bona fide spiker out there. I expect we'll probably see more of her coming up.
Well, Ana sorely missing Bell and Torres alongside her, that's for sure. Russians again coming in with the set points. Gracheva. Ruiz, Izquierdo, Gatto, and Gatto sends the one down easily.
Made that one work real well. I think that was Ruiz coming across. You see, look at her. At 1.76, she just skyrocket. She just gets up over there and finds the angle. She's got the best angle type hit of maybe of any of those side spikers I've seen. Really has natural talent and instinct for the game.
First serve, and it's the Russians again at match point, and the Russians in a favor again for the Cubans.
And if I was Pachenko, I don't believe I'd be looking at the bench right now. I think I'd just keep my eyes on the net and my fellow teammates, because those lasers are over there working in overtime.
And now the Russians aiming to do one right, and they did one beautifully this time to Godina.
Godina coming back and fortunately getting him back in the situation, get Karpov to not be thinking about what went on a few minutes ago, get his ulcer really working for him. Maybe they can end it this time. Let's see what they do.
Enrique Ruiz.
Cubans denying. Look at that. Individual talent. That's what did it.
Costa, the player there. Center ball against two bodies. Ball coming down over. And Costa undid what she did so well earlier, sending the ball straight in, presenting the Russians with yet another chance to end the second set.
And it's Tina who's got a chance to do it. She'll revert. She'll sometimes go to a standard serve as opposed to the jumper, and that helps.
And the blockers did their job out of maneuver. In particular, the Russians at first this second set, winning 15-8.
It's their turf.
2 sets to down in a handsome position here over the Cubans.
Well, they should be able to relax a little bit more, but not much, because I tell you what, the Cubans are the type of team, and I have said this, and I'm going to go on the line and say it again, they always find a way to get up for the big games. When their backs against the wall is when they're playing best. We got a little bit of a departure on this offensive lineup, but if that mentality operating in this unit, you're going to see something different come out of them this game, because they're not going to give it up, not just yet.
Well, I'm sure the burning question in the minds of many people, Steve, is that can the Cubans now do it? I know they have come back in the past, but with Bell and Torres in their ranks, tonight, without them, can they do it? That is the big question.
Well, let's just sit back and watch it, because there's something out there with this team. They're not playing bad, and I think they're finding their way here a little bit more flow.
Remains to be seen whether the Russians will allow the Cubans the luxury of a comeback. Relatively easy second set, 15-8. The Cubans do play well, but only in patches. That would not be good enough to stop the Russians. As a full call again on the Enrique Ruiz, touching the net on the way he's sending the ball over. So it will be the Russians who will serve again. Tichenko. Nice pick there from Ruiz. And the Cubans now with the side out of their own.
They're still playing through it. Russians only up by 1. They're out on serve now. Chance to lock it up.
Well, it's nicely set up then for the Cubans to finish it off, but the first time round they did not. But the second time round the block was good. Berto Francis as well as Costa forming the block there for the Cubans.
And it was a good block it was, too. Taken out to completely that side shot that the Russians so depend upon, that side spike. They need that in their arsenal in order to get their machine moving to high gear, and they need that as well, and they're missing.
The poor miss from Godina. As usual, it was nicely set up there from Gracheva.
And Karpov off there chirping it up again, because he doesn't want these types of mistakes, getting into this game. It's just he wants them to shut the door and go home and watch TV.
That's the intelligent player that we know she is, Godina, knowing the first time round the spike was not successful, and second time round she sent a spot there, an open space for her to exploit, and she sent it out beautifully. Cubans replying again, and Maleni Costa doing a fine job there.
Maleni Costa also considered to be one of the better setters in the team, but showing dual assignments here. When she has to, she can show you the spike, and she did. Good spike on the part of the Russians again coming through. I guess that was who?
That was Morozova.
Morozova. She's been relatively quiet, hasn't she, Tay? We really haven't seen much of her throughout this tournament in these last couple of games. She's in it, but she's not a big factor most of the time.
Looks like in most teams there are the players who really stand out, and there are some who are underrated. Morozova, definitely one of the underrated Russians. But of course, she just go about her work in a quiet manner and effective as well. There's Gracheva. Morozova sends one over. Foster now sets it up nicely for Gato. Gato, by comparison, has not had a good second set.
She also has been quiet. She's got to get into this offensive flow in terms of that quick attack ability that she has. And, of course, that means getting set properly. The ball's out. Yumilka hits that one. Right now, you see, we're like on a teeter-totter, aren't we, here at Tay? It's really neither team's got dominance. The Russians sort of stumbled through the first two, but I don't see them coming out. I don't hear the Russian bear growling at all right at the moment.
You're right. And the Cubans, well, at least they have got the scores in their favor at this point of time in the third set. 2 sets now, thanks to Merker picks up serve. Another of the Cuban players trained to go about their job in a disciplined manner, Francis Merker. And that will land a point for Gato and the Cubans.
And what you saw happening that made that come together was that dig out there in that secondary line. The Cubans that's probably the one edge they have with this lineup they've got right now over the Russians. They can out-dig you, especially get those athletic digs going. Here again, you see Karpov talking to him. He wants them to get dominant, take over this thing, and run it right to its end course.
And no one out-jumped Tichenko then. Adamanova comes again. Release speeds well, send the ball over, and with the full call. Good take again from Esquerdo. Milka returning the favor, and Esquerdo sends the one beautifully over.
And it was all just a matter of just great athletic talent. She didn't really get it set up all that well. The ball was coming around. You see the set was actually behind her, and she took that ball and arched it through. Great shot.
Experience of Esquerdo also coming into full then, as the ball lands wide, but
I think it went long. We got a camera panning around on us, but I think we got a timeout on the play now.
well, the Cubans are in front at this juncture. 5-1, and we'll go for another break.
They know how to high step you. They really do, and if they do, it's going to be fun time here in Shanghai.
Gato immediately then trying to secure the 6 points for the Cubans, and Ilya Esquerdo then letting slip the opportunity. And Adamanova then with the rising shot, and the ball just counting down to the far end. Shaver. Esquerdo, and that one had power and pace.
And that was Ana Fernandez, and there again you see that secondary line, that second position, not able to take the digs out quite as efficiently as we've seen the the Cubans do on the other end. Could be a factor. It's one of those kind of stats that starts to creep up as the game progresses. Again, you see him breaking down on that second line.
And again, the Cubans have got a point. Ana Fernandez, 6-1. Gato. Fine running spike this time from Tichenko.
Tichenko showing him what has to be done, but you see you don't have the dominance, and I've said this before, and the Russians have to find dominance in order to win. They have to be a little bit more aggressive, especially on that secondary line.
Well, the team's taking time here to assert their superiority as Matatina lends the ball just wide off the far end.
Looked right, almost got the line. It was a beautiful shot. She went for the liner. She lives and dies by it.
This time the ball is in. And Simonova comes in again for the...
And we're now starting to see Ana Fernandez start to show him a little bit, number 16. 14, I should say.
Here's Godina. And a bit of a sluggish attempt to return the ball there on the part of the Cubans.
And they're trading spikes right now. It's not working out for the Russians. They've got to find a way to get some assertion in this game and find out if they can string a few together. That's one. I believe that's theirs, wasn't it?
Another great block then by the Russian wall.
There's two. And again, it's in this case, that last one was another unforced error, and now they're within one.
Cubans really finding going tougher here on the resumption after the first technical timeout. As we're about to see more substitutions. And Sanchez, this is a new player for the Cubans. And out goes to Milka Ruiz.
Sanchez standing 1.79 meters, not terribly tall. Biggest player out there is Ana Fernandez, 1.85 on the Cuban side. Great spike. That's the kind of stuff that they need to see, some stuff that just took the Cubans completely out of the game. I don't know who that was. It looked like to me, was it Gracheva that made that one work? If she did, boy, she's a pocket powerhouse.
Titina now, and that serve was good. And the Russians are really storming back now.
She's what we call a switch hitter here. She can give you a standard serve, or she can give you this. And she's going to that big jumper, another big drop ball. But this time, you see, again, that secondary line is not doing its job. They're having a lot of problems back there in that defensive slot. They got to start shoring that one up. The Cubans are taking advantage of it.
So Sanchez, I believe we are seeing this girl for the very first time here in the Grand Prix series. Goes to show that the Cuban coach Perdomo is ready to dig deep now into the reserves.
And she came up with a jump serve, and she obviously a little bit tight. She's standing up here, hadn't been in any much of action, and now all of a sudden has to perform. She'll come around.
Real baptism here for Fernandez, but she'll take a leave or two out of the book of Gato. Certainly come on well. And coming into play here in the third set,
I think it was Gato who came across with that very nice set to get that point going. She's starting to look at all her players and getting them moving around a little bit. Again, nobody dominant on that spike side, but everybody individually talented enough to do it when they have to. They're just sort of piecing it together, just kind of like putting a rug together or a sweater together. They're finding the different loopholes and going.
Gato again reading very nicely the jump serve from Artemanova. Gordina keeps that in play. Morozova sends the free ball back into the Cuban half. It's Sanchez. And that one was nicely set up from the Cuban number 2 for Fernandez. Costa. And then comes Fernandez.
Costa, another good setter, knows how to do it, but also can get that big spike going, that quick spike. There's that quick attack from number 12, Gracheva. We've seen her do this before. That one helped, like a little hook shot on a basketball court. Just brought the ball over nicely into the open zone.
Looks as if Gracheva has eyes on the back then. She saw there was nobody in attendance. Down she went. And again, the ball comes into focus. Tichenko then.
Tina also part of that wall, and that's good to see because the Russians have to set that one up. That lateral movement has to be continuing against this very fast team that they're looking at.
Gracheva then waiting for the all-clear signal from the referee before taking up the serve.
Gracheva stands 1.80, one of the smaller players. In fact, the smallest one out in that lineup. You got him at 1.86, Tichenko, and 1.88, Morozova. So 1.84 is Baltustina. So you can tell they are really tall timber out there. Lovely, lovely turf. Good game. Got a very, very nice steady game, and I like her touch. You know, when she gets up off the ball and she's setting properly, of course, she gets a lot of Nikolai's heat because a lot of this thing has to set up with her ability. It's that unseen type of thing, Tay, right? I mean, it's always great to see the regulator types get in there, but this is the type of finesse that makes volleyball players great. have that good touch. She and Yoko Zetterlund, several others around that I've seen this tournament. There we got an error again. Maybe a free ball. They'll survive.
Sanchez did well then to send the ball over. There was a neat serve. A neat dig then. Gracheva setting up nicely, and it was well taken care of by Gordina in the end.
Gordina using her head that time, going right up over the defense into that open area. No one compensated. It helped. Here comes Gracheva again on her open hand palm serve.
The Russians now opening up a 2-point lead as the spike comes nicely off the hands of Gordina, off that spike from Fernandez.
Well, you can get the wall up there, but if the ball doesn't stay in play, the wall doesn't do you much good. You might as well just let it fall in because it's the same result. And Russians been doing that a little bit tonight.
Yes, Gordina, and this time the block earns the Cubans a point.
Well, you know, I'll tell you something. You can't go 2 or 3 feet behind the net and expect to get that spike going. Look where she's at going for it. Not against the Cubans. They're going to make you pay for the price for that one. Let's see if she improves this time. Didn't go her way.
Nicely set up again from Gracheva.
And again, look where she's standing. She's what? And this time about 8 feet behind. Same end result. She needs to make her height work for her by getting right up on that net, Tate, and then making it happen.
And has presented the Cubans here with the 8 points, the equalizing point here, as Scotto sends the ball over. And from the very same spot there, the trouble not over here for the Cubans. In fact, it's for the Russians. It is the Cubans who have now got in front.
And they're doing it by just being scrappy and just their individual athleticism. And the breakdown a little bit in the Russian unit. The passing's not as sharp as it has been.
All the Cubans are looking for point number 10. Alenis Costa then has set up. And there will be a point for the Cubans.
It's their turf. It's their
The Cubans now in the good 3-point lead here over the Russians.
They've been able to build that lead by playing consistent, playing just that scrappy type of offense, and the Russians have been making their share of mistakes. Russians are in danger now of losing their first game and putting the Cubans on a little bit more of a roll here. And I'm sure that Karpov is not happy.
Now the nice touch there from Alenis Costa as she appeals there for the decision to go her way. In fact, it has been granted by the referee. Gracheva is set. Not handled well there by Tichenko. Second time round, Cubans putting the ball back over. Out of it over. Gato.
And look at him dig. Look at him go. This is the point I'm making, Tay, right there. You see how they got that point? They got that point with individual athleticism and great digging on that side. And there they are, 14-9, ready to go at least one back on them.
Take a moment here. As Mr. Francis, well, she tried her best then to defend the ball back, but there was power and there was direction from Atamanova's spike. Comes back now with this jump serve. The Russians aiming to stay in the game, and the Cubans not allowing the Russians any space there in the maneuver.
Well, I think the right word right now, from what I'm looking at, as they're sitting on a 14-9 lead, is they're getting ready to punish the Russians. They are punishing them anytime they come up short, and that center spike just went right down. There was no play on that. The ball had just too much depth to it, too much pace.
That pointer here again for the Cubans. And that one lands in for the Russians. No, it was out.
It was out. We've got ourselves a 2-1 game now.
So the Cubans have won this third set, 15-9. The crestfallen Russian team trooping out here out of court.
Going for it.
So the Cubans are now 1-2 behind the Russians. A steering fight back from the Cubans in the third set, eventually winning 15-9 over the Russians.
Well, you gotta like what the Cubans are doing. I mean, what's coming together the way they are, playing the way they are. There's nobody out there really dominant as a spiker, yet they're seeming to find the holes and the seams in the Russian defense and they're just using great athletic ability to get where they want to go. The big difference between the two, I think it's on the secondary positions and the digging power that the Cubans have demonstrated as opposed to the Russians, who are not moving as well, and when the ball gets back here, they're in trouble.
Well, there's another nice setup there for the Cubans, and Ana Fernandez at the end of that spike.
Well, Anna can do it, and she has not really been all that much of a factor in the first two games, but maybe she'll start showing up a little bit in a more traditional role this one. I don't know.
Gordina certainly wasn't allowed to exhibit her spiking prowess that much in the third set. And over at the other end, Cappuccino certainly can.
And the momentum shifting ever so slightly back toward the Cubans in terms of their style of play and what they're up to, although that's a good attack right there.
And this time the attack from Gato. And again, lots of questions asked of the referee.
Looked like a side out back to the Cubans, and yeah, it is. Then I got a chance to go into gain some points here.
But immediately the Russians countered, ball finding the line at the far end of the court. Shevchenko. Great dig there from Sanchez. Certainly has made a name for herself since she came on. The number 17 go.
And who was it just hit that? Was that Costa? Looked like Costa come across. She's been starting to pick up the role of a spiker and hitting a lot of nice cross-court shots like that. That one just spun right in there. There's an error they don't need, the Russian. That was just a poor attempt to set up the ball and pass it on.
So 1 point apiece here. Fernandez. Generally, the serving department for the Cubans today has been quite good.
Well, that left series you saw there was made in Russia. I mean, there was a great shot by Gracheva, and I believe that was Artemanova that came up and picked up that final spike. That's what they do best when the two of them are working in unison.
Now the Cubans coming again. Oh, that one was wide. That one was long from Gato.
Edges hammer, and they're just going for it. I get a feeling the Cubans are starting to feel that they can penetrate a little bit more than they did in the first couple of games, and they're not afraid to open up their game a little bit. They're a freewheeling bunch, they are.
Esquerdo setting up again, and the block could only push the ball over, and it's Melendez Costa now to pick up the serve here for the Cubans. Nice block at the far end here. Now the turn of the Cubans, and they did the damage there on the Russians.
They turned around, didn't they? And that was Mirka Francis, I believe, that was able to pull that spike off. Again, coming out of nowhere, off the bench, showing her ability.
Very nearly again, the Cubans could have found themselves point number 3 at that ball crept a little closer to the inside of the Russian half. And the line's woman there was trying to get her out of the way there. The thunderous spike from Melendez Costa.
Costa went through again, and she's very, very effective on that quick attack spike. I think she's the best at the head, even with their full complement out there. That's the one they'll go to for that type of reaction.
Oh, the block again from Esquerdo of Artemanova was not good enough. Side out back to Morozova. Gato did well the first time, now going into the same position that time with Mirka Francis. And a little apology ran from Francis, the teammate Gato, allowing the Russians now to go in front. Now Gato again couldn't find a way through. Second time around, and she finds the spot.
You see what's happening is their pace is picking up, isn't it? And they're starting to penetrate from that side over there. The Russian wall is not as effective as we've seen it in other games just recently against the Chinese. They are not reacting well. And a part of it has something to do, I think, with the pace of the ball. I really do, Tay. Their ball is really, really blistering. It's coming at them like a rocket. It's like a Tomahawk missile. There's not much you can do about it.
There was Well, certainly nothing the Cubans can do about that spike from Artemanova.
Great serve. Puts them right away on the defensive and gets that wall a chance to set up. You see, they got a little more time to set up. They can do it. Now the Russians, now you see right now for them, it's very important to maintain momentum. Absolutely important and critical.
Second good serve coming from Artemanova as Willie Esquero with a half spike of sorts.
And a half spike went back into that dead zone back there. That's what I'm calling it, because it really has been a dead zone for the Russians. It's dealt them a lot of problems tonight.
2-4. Cubans trail. And now altogether not a good spike this time from the Russian, but it did its job eventually, slipping off the hands there of the Cuban blocker. Oh, that's a beauty. Nobody in attendance then.
And no answer. The wall can't do it, and the players in that back zone can't do it. Look at this. Let's see why. Take a look there. You had 3 players there, but they really weren't, I don't think they were locked up tight enough in order to be formidable. She found a spot through them.
Artemanova sends it back to Gatto, and Lilia Esquero coming off the set that one beautifully for Ana Fernandez to land a point here for the Cubans. Now 3-4.
And let me tell you what, I think for the first time we're seeing the Russians starting to break down on the net. And when that starts to happen, you got trouble in River City, because the Russians got to hold that wall up. That's where their mud has to hold. They can't back off of it. And I'm starting to see it happen now. Let's see if this trend continues, because if that's so, Karpov is going to have himself an ulcer for sure.
Well, and the Cubans have got to realize this particular aspect and try to capitalize on it as much as they can. Fernandez again. What is over? Wait in.
And again, those baseline digs are working out for the Cubans. There it is. At that time, they held the wall.
Marta Sanchez then surrendering to the power of the Russian blockers. Set up again, and that one finds the mark nicely. Dr. Francis and Fernandez, and it was the latter who got the touch. Here comes Artemanova, and she found a way through.
That helps. It really does, because they're kind of like a gyroscope, you know. They're just wobbling a little bit here. They don't have that hum going the way we expect to see them happen. Here you see she's changed the serve again, Bakutina. Going the other way now to standard.
That ball is put long then, and that will be points. Number 5 here for the Russians. Here in the 4th set, they lead 5-3. We'll be back in a moment. Levis Costa, and that was punished by Dr. Francis.
And they're going for that angle, and in so doing, they're able to negate, or in fact, many times get around that blocking power of the Russians, and they're not able to react to that, the Russians. They haven't figured out a way to stop that.
Artemanova can't find a way through this time round.
Again, you see the slowness there. Of course, you know, they had them frozen, and largely because the spikes are starting to come at them, but they're not reacting behind that second line, and that is not good, not a good sign for the Russian side.
There's Artemanova, and the one tips the hand of Dr. Francis as Tichenko comes in again for Timonova.
Morozova very, very much needs to get this team's service moving so they can get some rhythm back in their game. They're starting to falter.
And Lilia Esquero finding Tichenko and Artemanova there in the twin block. All eyes on the second referee as to what the position would be.
It's gone to Cuba. Of course, the Russians thought that they had that one. That's a hurtful one. That doesn't help.
And Artemanova, this time again, another angle shot. And this time the ball just finds the eye nicely.
Well, for the Russians to be absolutely ideal and prime, they've got to be able to do that, plus be able to intimidate coming right at you. And that's where they've been shut down. They're not able to do that so well tonight.
Looks like the Cubans have found a way to counter this aggression
And
of
they
the
have
Russians.
right, and they've come right down the center to do it. And that's exactly where the difference lies right now. That and what's happening back there on that secondary line.
Oh, it's gone out again. The spike from Artemanova.
And now we're locked up at 5 apiece. Slowly but surely, the Cubans are finding ground to climb on to hold their own.
They have got up another point again. The blockers going up in unison to deny Gordina.
There's another poor pass. A set to get things going. It puts the rhythm the other way. In trouble again.
7-5 it is for the Cubans.
It's all happening on that back line, isn't it? It's really happening back there. And I'm sure Karpov is concerned now.
7-5 is Spiro, another good serve. And the running spike this time. The Cuban blockers, Gato in particular, pushing the ball away.
Gracheva normally a pretty good server, pretty steady, pretty reliable. To the book there.
Russians now chasing a 2-point margin immediately. Anna Fernandez secures the side out for her team. Let's see, just to borrow a phrase which to use on the Korean team, the longer the match goes, the better they play. I think it is the same now with the Cubans.
Well, that was the Korean rep, and we saw it played out in 100-4 with it, but you're right, the Cubans, this team anyway, normally they'll get sluggish on you, and all of a sudden you get this high-powered explosion. They go nuclear on you. There's no nuclear capability out there right now, at least not yet. But they have just sort of scraped their way through it. Yank this, pull that. Our producer says don't use junkyard dog, but I don't know what other term to describe how this one. Yeah, they're just pushing it around and making it happen.
And Gordina sending the ball long again. Now the Russians hitting many misses here. And the Cubans are really reeling in the points here. 8-5. Now putting a stop to that. Russians. Gordina.
Well, if they keep chewing, I tell you what, they keep chewing on the heels of the Russians. They're gonna turn this thing around on them, and I'm sure that the Russians need to find a way to get dominance. That's been their problem since the opening tap of the ball. They have not been able to dominate this Cuban side with the ease that they've had with some of the other teams coming up.
Costa, Artemanova back in place for Tichenko. Artemanova. Sanchez gets well. Gato seizing the opportunity to set up Espiro. Here comes Espiro again. The two good blocks.
See those digs? That's what I'm talking about. That's what gets them into trouble. They could have been put away at least 3 times, Erte, but because of those digs, and that's just, infectious, man. Everybody's smiling, laughing. Look at the difference in the team. Look how their attitude's working, and then you take a look here in a minute, you'll see what the Russians are doing.
And it certainly took the better part of the stamina then of the Espiro to get that point, which was the 9th point there for the Cubans. 9-5 now in the lead here in the 4th set. 2-1 down the Cubans to the Russians. Artemanova now to the rescue, and is out. And the Cubans have got point number 10. Only 10-5 here over the Russians. We'll be back after this short break. He said the Cubans have come charging and storming back.
Well, you can sense it coming on. You really can. And this is the reason why right there. I mean, they're just getting a lot of opportunities, and they're just peppering, literally peppering that back line of the Russians. Look at this one here. That spike is very hard to play. You could have 5 libero jackets on and have trouble with that one.
And there's the Izquierdo who got that point for the Cubans. And then he's Costa there, setting up nicely then. Well, I thought the ball would have gone long had it not been for the intervention of the Russian player.
Got her hand up there, and look at that. 12-5, and they're just sort of rolling right along as we go into a timeout. I don't know if the camera's going to go to Nikolai Karpov. I'd like to see what his expression is right now. But the Russians are bemused and baffled a little bit about what's happening to him. You can see what he's doing. He's saying, come on, man, you got to get back into this thing. Come on, let's talk about it. And, you know, the players are just not there. They're just, look at their faces. And as I said a few moments ago, you could see the Cubans, who are very, very much different in terms of their game ahead right now. This is a game head kind of sport. Really, if your game head gets out of line and you can't deliver, it becomes an infectious thing. It's kind of like a cold, you know. The bacteria spreads around. Everybody sort of sits around and says, oh, me, oh, my, I'm not there. And that's what's sort of happening to the Russians right now. See them pull this one out if they can.
Well, they have not managed to secure the side out. They have gifted a point here for the Cubans, and it's 13-5. We were talking about the habits, the good habits certainly circulating around the Cubans.
They're just playing for the game. I mean, you can see them having a good time out there right now. They're a pretty relaxed bunch, and she just had herself an error. Wasn't happy about that. At 13-5, you know, puts them in a driver's seat.
Time for a comeback here for the Russians, perhaps. After Tina, and that not finds the line. The second time she has got a point for the Russian team off the jump serve.
Yeah, had to be the serve of the contest as far as I'm concerned. That was a beauty. She just hooked it. I don't know that I'd try it again. It's a pretty high-risk number here.
Well, even Artemanova has not managed to secure a point off her jump serve. It's Dr. Tina who has got two so far today.
Well, you play these teams and then you're going to run up against the Cubans. That's another deal entirely.
Sanchez, 2 more points for this revitalized and rejuvenated Cuban team, as the down is Gato couldn't get past Morozova that time.
But what was impressive was when you saw Gracheva a few moments earlier trying for that little quick little shot, and they are so fast, the Cubans, they were able to play it back.
There's the set, and is Twitter, and she finds that spot with a great deal of ease.
And standing at 1.74, she just comes back around again. It's all timing, isn't it? It really is with this team. This is probably one of the quiet edges you see. It's the timing.
Now Francis Merker just waits to the serve there. And it will be Artemanova who take that serve here for the Russians.
It's amazing about this crowd. I've been listening. It's sort of like being inside a train station. You don't hear a lot of cheering one way or another. A lot of respect out there in hushes, but that's about it. Somebody out there pounding up a sign or something, we could pick that up.
For the neutrals, I suppose they will want to see a Cuban victory here. And even as we speak here, there is the substitution. Malini Costa making way for Baros. And back to the point, it was the Russians who handed their team a 3-0 drubbing. So a victory here for Cuba will be very much welcome, I suppose. Izquierdo. Starling Roach has played for the Cuban team in this matchup. That ball was good.
And Elena Godina has really not been a factor. She has been virtually a tornado coming through this series up until she ran into this wall, the Great Wall of Cuba. It's been modified and repaired here, but it's still doing its job. She hasn't really been that big a deal tonight. And, you know, that's a real big part of the story so far, and how they've gotten themselves back so far this game here as well.
Now the Cuban girls are looking to coach Perdomo on the bench to how to secure the point to wrap up this second set for the Cubans, which will force this match into the fifth and the starting set. Shevchenko. Nice set again. The ball comes flying off the hands of Gracheva, and that was counted now.
I think that was number 17, Sanchez, that pulled that shot off. She didn't waste no time either. She didn't need help. She saw the ball, and she just went up after it, and that was all she wrote.
And this time it was Morozova who quickly put an end to that rally.
Well, they're just playing push me, pull you now. But it's still, what is it, 13-7, is it? Or 5? It's a pretty low-scoring affair for the Russians. They're not there yet, not even close.
Side out again. Costa comes back in place of Baros. And it will be Costa for the serve. And the Cubans again negating Artemanova's spike.
And they're within one of scoring. There it is, 14-6. I was one digit off. If they do it here, we've got ourselves a new ball game all the way around. And there she comes, big time.
And certainly it was. They came off Merkel Francis, 15-6, two-set roll. We'll be back with the decider in a moment. Two-set roll. We'll be back with the decider in a moment. Merkel Francis, 15-6, two-set roll. We'll be back with the decider in a moment.
Are stymied right now. The big machine is not moving the way it has been. But this is a different deal. Here you got to figure spike power has got everything to do with the winner and the loser, because you don't get second chances here.
And remember, every point counts. There are no start-outs. The Cubans lost yesterday to the Brazilians in 5 sets. They certainly would want a repeat of that. Plenty of incentive for them to finish on the winning side tonight.
Regina, I believe, missed that shot or not, because it's a critical miss if she did. No, I think she knows. It's 2-1 to Russians. Now, this is a real important service series for them. They don't want to get anywhere near behind this Cuban team who's on a roll. Look at this. You see, they're just pounding them now.
2 chances the Cubans had, and second time round.
And Anna
Mendes found them out.
That's right. She's been in and out of this game tonight, but today she was there for everybody to see. Look at that. Again, individual talent. Didn't look for the set. Could figure out and climbing up the ladder and getting it herself. Lots of talent on this side.
Now, Gordina.
Still 3-2.
Garcia and Gordina was not able to handle Costa.
And what you see is a repeat of what's been going on, only now it's critical time. We are into heart-thumping time because they missed it again on that baseline, and that's happened just far too much tonight for the Russian side. Bad set there.
And Atamanova got the point in off the block from Francis Merker.
Russians not as sharp as we saw them against the Chinese by far.
Russians nowhere near the form which they displayed in the first 2 sets of this contest, as they are punished once more by Sanchez.
On that secondary line again, Tay. Once they get it past that wall, and the wall has been cracking, then they're in trouble. Whereas the Cubans, exactly the opposite story. They're giving it up and picking it up and taking those digs and making them work for it. See what I mean? They're still in it, and they make a point out of it. That is exactly what I'm talking about.
And Marlene Costa delighted with the part she played in the Cubans securing the point.
For all the world, they should have been out of it, but turned it around. In the rally situation, that's great. But there's Gracheva answering with her own style of offensive play.
And again, it was a back end to the net, a swift turn, and a two-handed push. Then this time with the left hand, and a point for the Russians. Still keeping very close tabs here with the Cubans. And the ball sent wide this time. Another point as the Russians come going back 5-6.
Morozova has to hold her own on to serve, but more importantly, this is a little bit of a mini break for them, possibly, to get themselves locked up, get some momentum going, get that spike working again. There's really a break for them. Now they've got as good an opportunity as they're going to get.
And we are all even here at 6 points all. Morozova again prepares to serve here for the Russians. Good dig there by Gato. And Sanchez then negated the block. Russians go in front.
That's right. And what did it that time was the timely blocking where they really needed it. They were able to do it. Morozova on a good run.
That's here, Sanchez. This time a good dig. A set here. Sanchez trying to make amends there. And the block this time pushes the ball out and gets the point to the Cubans.
3 blockers up there. The ball had so much lickety split on it that when they finally made contact on the palms, it took off. It's just like a ball off a tennis racket. It just moved.
Oh, that's out. And
that's a point for the Russians.
Yes. A 12 serve in this fifth and deciding set to give the opponents the point, unlike in the ordinary circumstances. As they have been changed over in ends here, the Cubans now 1 point behind.
I wouldn't want to guess which way it's going now. The momentum's been building for the Cubans over the last 2 games. They've come into this one. They're not showing any signs of cracking. The Russians all now are starting to finally get that offensive, that big flywheel going here a little bit. They need some help from this serve. For sure, not bad, but it's a short serve. And they pick up yet another.
And then the Esquerdo spike could only come off the hands of Pichenko, and the ball falls over into the Cuban half for a point for the Russians.
Something over there has gotten into Karpol again. You know, he's looking right over at number 8. He's looking at Artemanova. Now he's admonishing his team. He's got a 2-point lead, but it's obvious he's not comfortable. That's not a correct graphic. That obviously, for all the world to know, Nikolai Karpov. This gentleman is Mr. Perdomo, and you can see how he's coaching his side. He's talking to him. He's got his little book there. He's letting them know what's going on. This team appears to me to be a bit more relaxed at this juncture, Tay. They're more experienced by far. Russians, you know, for a team at this standard, this level, have not been in the game that long.
Cubans, of course, have several youngsters in the ranks today. The suspension of Bell and Torres. And it will be to their great credit if they manage to pull a victory from this contest.
Yeah, but, you know, the point is hanging around greatness can mature you real fast. Even though they're young, they've got some great people to work out with every day, be with, and when they get in there, it's great experience for them. So I think in terms of maturity, I think they're a little bit deeper than the Russian side.
Practice Marcus Thatcher has certainly grown in this match.
And they're locked up again, 9-9. Boy, I tell you, you just don't know which way this one's going to rotate.
Racheva. Oh, the ball comes off the hands of Sanchez. Point for the Russians.
It helps them, and as I said earlier, when this thing started, this little Donnybrook, the setting or the spiking power of the Russians could be a little bit of an edge for them in the final few points that we're going into here.
Well, again, if not for the intervention, the ball might just have gone out from the spike.
It could have. We saw an effort on the part of that secondary to try to pick it up, unavailable, not there.
Lock at 10 points all, and that will be a point for the Russians. They go in front again. No thanks to that first serve from Esquerdo.
And boy, you just get the feeling that neither of these teams can stand the prosperity. They just don't want to take it from one another. That time you do. That time, who was that? I can't pick up her number on there. Number 5, was it? It might have been Gatto picking that shot up. Beautiful spike right down the pipe, and they've been very successful going right at the heart of the Russian defense.
Still nothing to separate the two teams at this late stage. Gordina setting up nicely against Gracheva. Let's see Gordina, whether she can do. Well, Gordina's form and confidence seems to desert her. I would expect her to come down with a spike that time. She chose to send a big shot over.
You're right. She's been really kind of out of rhythm all that time. I don't think we'll see the replay on that one. But really, she had a lot of time to get close to that net and elevate and take that shot. But instead, she tried to just dink it over, and that's just not playing smart against the Cubans, who are very, very quick, and I suspect a bit quicker than this side.
Mr. Karpov looking at Gracheva, looking at Artemanova.
She really gets keyed on a lot because, as I told you, this player is the heart and soul as far as the sets go. She misses it there. You saw that little tap from Bakutina trying to tell her to keep her chin up. She's had a hard day with the coach. She certainly has, hasn't she?
So back they come. Cuban right on top of this critical juncture of this game. Gordina again this time. She tries to score a point. Not quite yet. As Sanchez comes.
The wall's there.
Here comes Sanchez again. Just tries to do a dummy over the Russians. And this time they found a point with a block from Fernandez.
If I'm not mistaken, that looked to me like a libero over there trying to hit that ball over the net. And I'm rather surprised about that. Number 11. Who is she, number 11? Let's get her off the lineup. That's a very unusual shot because there's some rules about that, and one of them is I don't think she could do what she just was allowed to do. That's quite surprising.
Well, perhaps Timanova's actions there escaped the attention of the officials.
Or maybe there's just some subtlety there that we haven't picked up. In any event, look at this. It's 13-12. getting down to fish or cut bait time.
Valentina at least providing the Russian team with a good serve there as the Russians came to that point, and they are now sailing at defeat after going 2 sets up.
And somebody drilled a hole in the Iron Curtain that time because she scored it, and they're right now on the verge of putting it all away, the Cubans.
There comes Adamanova. Still not quite enough. Just up to Gato. Pushed out after Morozova. And it's 15-14. The battle continues.
Well, you got a real thumper going here, don't you? I mean, both sides of it. One mistake, and it's all over. I love these 5-game sets. We got another timeout. We're going to get a book reading here, I suppose, from Karpov with his club. Let's see who he's singing on right now. He's looking right back at her again. Poor Miss Gracheva is just, maybe he just talks to her, and he's really talking to the whole team. Maybe that's what it is, Tay. Well, if I ever get a chance, I'll ask him. My Russian's not so good. I speak a little Serbo-Croatian. Maybe we can communicate. Right there, the communication is pretty loud and clear in any event.
Short work here from Prodovo over at the Cuban camp. And I'm sure words of encouragement, too. They know the Cubans have a good chance here of closing up this match, although it's 1 point only the difference.
And there again, number 4, Bakutina going the other direction, a different kind of serve. Lou, look at that. Great dig with the Russians. They needed that one. And there the wall is, right there.
And Gracheva has secured the equalizing point. For once here, the crowd comes to life.
And they're looking at that wall, that big Russian wall coming up there. And boy, did they need it then. Here we go.
14 all. Couldn't have been finally balanced then. The scoreline at this moment. There's a big one. And that one finds a point for the Cubans.
Just an outstanding shot there by who was normally a setter. She comes around again and does her little spike number. Angled it perfectly to the open area into that once again open second area. Second session back there.
One more point for the Cubans. They never do it. No, the block sends the ball out. And it's 15-15 as we see the entrance of Tichenko once again in place of Timonova.
It's a real bone rattler. It really is. Russians definitely trying to use that superior height to their help. And there again, the block is not enough. It didn't stay in bounds. Now we're at 16-15. Cubans got a chance to wrap it. What a win it would be, Tay.
Francis Merker has snatched this all-important point here. 16-50. 2 clear points is all that's needed. As Sanchez serves. Tension in the crowd. Atmosphere electrifying.
Another great dig.
Gato and the Cubans have won this contest.
Boy, they shut off the faucet. They did muzzle the Russians there. They really did. The Russian bear just couldn't move quick enough to get up that ball because the ball was just in that dead zone. What a great match it was, and it just goes to show you how really, really tough the Cubans can be under any conditions. You never, ever take them for granted.
And every Cuban girl out there on court is a hero.
And they're delighted. Look at Ruiz. You'd have thought they just won it all, you know. And there's some of the other players, the two